Hello, basketball fans. I'm Tommy Beer from Rotoworld, joined by Ryan Knaus and Jared Johnson. Fellas, let's talk a little bit about risk-reward targets that, may target in the middle rounds, may target in the late rounds, may go a little bit early. But these are guys that you feel, yes, you understand that there's some red flags there, but you feel, especially when those guys start to slip a little bit, that presents a real opportunity for value, guys that could outproduce their ADP.
Yep.
Ryan, who you circling?
Well, so this is about as risky as it gets, but I'm gonna say Victor Oladipo. We know he's coming off a ruptured quad, which is a very serious injury. It's unclear when he might return, but he's gone through some activities at training camp, so we've at least seen him on the court. It sounds like he'll probably miss the rest of 2019, but possibly we see him in January. Yes, he'll have minute restrictions and the dreaded random DMP rest games to keep him healthy. So you have to bake that in. But if you look at a guy, the Pacers are going to be a playoff team, right? They could vie for the third best record in the East.
Yep.
They're going to want their star, Victor Oladipo, in rhythm, healthy, ready to go for the postseason. So to me, he actually shapes up pretty well for fantasy playoffs. As in a guy that in March could be finally ramping up, getting close to 32 minutes a game as they get him up to speed. So if you have an IR spot, I think he's a great target because he's falling to 60, 70, 80 in most drafts. And if you could just put a guy with 2 years ago, he was a top 12 player. So if you could stash that on your bench and hope that it pans out, it's a good mid-round gamble.
If I was going to go devil's advocate, I'd say he didn't really play that well last year, even when he was healthy.
42% from the field.
That's a little bit concerning.
With the same coach and the same players around him, basically. The only real difference was Tyreek Evans.
Yeah,
right.
I think Brogdon will make his life a little bit easier. I think he was
point.
playing a position he wasn't super comfortable with and forcing up some action. But
yeah. I think we can, even setting that aside, I think the key is, does he come back mid-January? Does he come back, maybe beat estimations, come back mid-December?
Yeah. And
that's right up in the air. You're right. You see him, you look him, he seems like he's already going through practices, so it's not a situation where, when Kawhi missed the whole year, he was out. You never even heard of him.
You never see him on the court.
So it's positive. It seems like he's ready to prove himself again. So I like to gamble, but as Ryan mentioned, the key factor here, make sure your league has an IR spot, because if it's not an IR spot, then you'd want to wait to drop, 9th, 10th, 11th round, because otherwise he's just eating up a roster spot for 2 months, and that could really hurt you.
If you do have an IR spot, what round would you be comfortable taking?
With an IR, I think 5, 6, somewhere in there. Yeah, if I could stash him. In the draft we just did live for Rotoworld, we did not have an IR, and he fell all the way to the 11th, which sounds about right, because for a guy you can't, you're just racking up zeros. So.
And to your point, if you have an IR spot, there was some decent talent in the draft that we just did. We had a 13-round draft.
Yep.
Mikal Bridges, I think, had Cody Zeller. So there's some other guys. That is essentially another draft pick that you can really scoop up. And there's always somebody that has a great preseason that you want to scoop up off the wire. So if you can, I actually recommend that.
Adding a target, intentionally.
100%. Yeah. Even if you don't get Oladipo, in any draft where you have an IR spot and you realize you drafted a team without an IR eligible player, use that last pick to get a guy that you think that is even injured or can slide
free pick.
Exactly. Yeah. Somebody you're willing to roll the dice on. Who you got?
I'm willing to roll the dice on Paul George. I think that his shoulder stuff is being a little bit overblown. He said he's going to be back November-ish. I think he's downplaying it himself. The season doesn't start till October 22nd, so that means he misses the first couple weeks of the season, but I think that he's going to be there for the majority of the year. And this is a guy who, once he's on the court, he doesn't tend to leave it. I'm not really worried about him getting random rest days. And think about, this is a guy who has top 3 upside. And he's a guy that you can get around back half of round 2. And so that's when I'm willing to pull the trigger. Yeah. I'm not going to do it at the top of round 2. There's still too many good options. But once you start getting towards the back half of round 2, and you're getting a guy who when he's on the court, he has top 3 potential. So I'm just very willing. I'm not worried about the shoulders that much. And I think that playing with Kawhi, yes, I'm very nervous about him. Yeah. But I think that Paul George is going to shoulder the load.
There you go. I don't share that same optimism. I totally understand. As you mentioned, he finished 3rd overall in 9-cat leagues last year. I mean, this guy did it all. League leader in steals, among leaders in steals. Made over 400 3-pointers.
Yep.
Only 2 players in NBA history had done that coming into the season. He's built for dominant 9-category fantasy success. I'm just worried about those dual shoulder surgery surgeries. And the Clippers, he can be a free agent in a couple of years. I think, that the Kawhi Leonard in this era of load management is kind of, we're going to do everything we can to keep the player happy. And I think they want to do everything they can to keep Paul George happy and just, not push him to a certain extent.
That's definitely the risk.
I'm more on Tommy's side on this one just because with my second, if you say late second round pick, I don't want that much risk with my top 3 picks. I prefer guys that are healthy. And November-ish, yes, that's not a death sentence, if he misses a month. But it's still, you don't know when he comes back, might he be limited? If he tweaks his shoulder, is he out a month again?
Right.
I don't want those question marks, even if the upside is there.
And then how about an auction format where he's going like 38?
See, that's,
Yes.
If it's the equivalent auction-wise of getting him in like the 4th or 5th round in a snake.
Or even late 3rd. I think in our draft I was hoping he'd fall down. And just got sniped just before. But I agree. I think once he comes back, I think he'll be solid. I think they'll wait till he's 100%. But I think he may not come back till Thanksgiving-ish. So I'm just concerns there. And as you mentioned, end of the second round, there's a lot of solid high floor guys.
But hey, we're talking risk reward.
Exactly.
And that's who I'll pull the trigger on.
One guy that I have probably ranked higher than most, and you can check out my rankings as well as the other rankings of the guys on the Rotoworld Draft Guide. We definitely recommend it. Sleepers, busts, rankings, everything you guys could want in there, auction format. Kevin Love, I think he's going to be a real solid pro this season. I was high on him last year. Obviously, he disappointed based on the fact that he couldn't finish out the season, which isn't altogether surprising, his injury history. But let's not forget, he posted really solid numbers per 36 minutes with LeBron off the floor prior to LeBron leaving. And when he was the focal point in Minnesota, I went back and looked it up, 26.1 points, 12.4 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 2.5 trays. Is he going to approach those numbers? Obviously, of course not.
How old is he?
That was 4 or 5 years ago. I understand
Glad
it.
you walked that back.
But let's say he can give you 18 and 9 or so. So he's a few assists. He's a good passer. Knock down some threes. Cavs are a terrible team. I think the Cavs want to build up his value. He's in the first year of a 4-year extension. So they obviously would love to part ways with him and kind of invest in their rebuild. So I think they'll be motivated to get him out on the floor as much as possible. So
my fear there is that, yes, they want to build up his trade value, and he is a consummate professional. I don't think he's going to go out there and just go through the motions. But if they can't trade him and the All-Star break is approaching, they've already said that they're going to be cautious with him and rest him. I mean, he's a guy they don't want him to get hurt. There's no incentive to play him, really, except for how much he can make other teammates better, perhaps, with his, because he's a good passer and so forth. But I'm just afraid of that second half of him just completely dropping off. So yes, the top 40 value is obviously there, and he definitely falls, and that's why you get him a lot, because he's fallen to 70, 80 in drafts. So
where you at? You happy? Would you
I
roll
think
the dice at 70, 80?
70, 80, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just if you have to take him around round 4 or 5, that's that's too early for me.
Yeah.
But I could see it. I could see him, like a lot of people, they're not even thinking about him. But I could see him being the JaVale McGee of this season, where he's a player that everyone's kind of like making fun of, and he can have a really great year. Absolutely. So,
I tend to be targeting a guy like Miles Bridges or someone like that in the range where Love is going. I don't know. I tend towards
me. I'm very content taking that boring guy. Nobody in the room is going to go, oh, I wish I had him. But at the end of the year, they may have the highest production. We could talk about this forever, and we plan to at rotoworld.com. So definitely check us out. Stay tuned, and hope to talk to you guys soon.